Hey guys, so I'm going to go over some ecology stuff with you, talking about the biotic and abiotic interactions we learned about. So, first, I just want to go over how a community is formed, right? So, first, you have this dispersal filter. So, this is the ability for organisms to get there, to get to a location. And then you have, let me change this. And then you have the environmental filter. So maybe the pH is too high or low, temperature is not good, some sort of abiotic factor. So an abiotic factor that stops them from living there. And then you have the interaction filter. So the interaction filter is the biotic interactions that will prevent some organisms from living there. So like example would be competition or predation. Okay? And then whatever is left over that made it through all these filters, well, they now form the community. Okay? So just to go over the different biotic interactions we learned about, which would be that interaction filter. So we have competition. So competition is where two organisms are competing for the same resources, and it has a negative effect on both. And then you have symbiosis or mutualism. And this is where both species involved, they get a positive. So they both benefit. And then there's 3 types of biotic interactions where one gets something out of it and one is either harmed or gets nothing out of it. So the first one being predation. So one gets to eat and then one dies. So grazing is similar to predation, except instead of dying, it's not as bad, because if a bug grazes on a plant, that plant can grow back. Then you have parasitism. So parasitism, one completely benefits, gets food, everything's all good. And then the other one, well, for example, if you think about mosquitoes being a parasite on us, it's just like annoying. Sometimes it can carry lethal diseases, so it can range from annoyance to dead. So parasitism depends, but they are all these 3 are the same kind of, one will benefit and one does not benefit. So another thing that we talk about with the interaction filter, like the competition that I talked about earlier, a way that we can determine why certain organisms are in a community. Is it because of an environmental filter? Is it because of biotic interaction filters, so living factors? One example we talked about in class was this one with the birds. So what they did was they removed all these birds that lived at the top, and they wanted to see if these birds would move, and the middle birds would move to the top. And if they did move, so if they moved, that means that it was a interaction filter. But if they didn't move, so say they didn't move, that would be an environmental filter. because there must be some other reason, like either it's too hot, too windy, that they don't want to be at the top of the tree, which is why they have decided to stay in the middle of the tree and make that their ecological niche. So that brings us into the other thing we talked about when it came to interactions in a community, and that these different organisms within this community, they will have their own ecological niche. So this is basically a particular set of conditions in which a species can live in. Basically, they live here because it's favorable to them, not because the environment needs them to live there. So that is important to get that misconception straight. So they live in the niche because it is favorable to them, not because the environment needs them. Okay? Although them occupying this niche will help the environment in some case. So here's a perfect example of a niche. So these are all birds that eat stuff in the water, right? But they're not competing. And the reason for that is that this flamingo, well, eats stuff in the dirt, where this duck eats stuff in the grass, and this bird eats stuff on the surface of the water. So while they are all eating from the fresh body of water that they live in, it doesn't mean that they are competing for the same resources, and they're all occupying their own ecological niche. Okay, so that goes over abiotic and biotic interactions and ecological niches.